Bond films were so regular in the 1980s you could set your watch by them. Every 2 years, bam, Cubby Broccoli drops his latest spy thriller.
It's Bond.
For Timothy Dalton's second film as James Bond, the producers wanted to toughen up the venerable franchise, just as competing action films were starting to pull in bigger audiences than 007. Alas, like almost every book where the pet dog or cat's name is in the title, this is a story without a happy ending. License to Kill.
I help people with problems.
Problem solver.
I'm more of a problem eliminator.
Here is a film that some people intensely dislike, but other people love.
Bullshit!
And others still are somewhere in between. I'm somewhere in between, stuck in the middle like a slice of cheese taken prisoner by two halves of a bread roll. There's a fair bit to like in this film, but also just a little bit too much that's plain unappealing. It's a pizza topped with asparagus, apple, apricot and antifreeze. In 1989, Bond would be back on schedule, but by the late 80s, more and more big budget and often R-rated action movies were doing extraordinarily well at the box office, particularly in the US. In 1987, films like Beverly Hills Cop 2, Lethal Weapon, Predator and The Untouchables all took in substantially more money at the US box office than that year's rather good Bond film, The Living Daylights. James Bond films still did really good business worldwide, but as the largest market, the lower trending US box office numbers were concerning to United Artists and to Cubby Broccoli. The answer at the time was to toughen up Bond with a sandpaper makeover. Timothy Dalton was totally on board as he really wanted to get back to the Bond in the books and to put distance between his portrayal and that of his predecessor. Dalton's Bond was not flippant, with one-liners delivered with all the comedic verve of a public execution. By this time, the filmmakers had long since exhausted all of the names of Ian Fleming properties, so they were in the realm of plucking them out of thin air. The film was originally meant to be called License Revoked, but the studio insisted Americans would not know what revoked meant. You'd like to think that wasn't the case. Then, after all of that, they used the UK spelling for license, with a second C as it is a noun, rather than an S for a verb. But ordinarily in the US, it would be license with an S for both nouns and verbs, but crucially, not a videotape copy of this movie.
Thanks.
James Bond is in Florida for Felix Leiter's wedding, but just before the ceremony, an opportunity presents itself to take down the drug lord Sanchez. Sanchez is arrested but quickly sprung by a crooked DEA agent, and the thing about Sanchez is that while he's usually cool as a cucumber, he's also a raging psycho. Sanchez's men kill Leiter's bride and feed Felix to a shark. With his friend so horribly injured and the DEA, CIA and his own British Secret Service all either powerless or unwilling to get involved, Bond is, depending on your geography, fit to be tied, ropeable, pissed, pissed off, or just a touch miffed. His new nickname, Pistofferson.
This private vendetta of yours could easily compromise Her Majesty's government.
Bond springs into action, basically resigning from his job with immediate effect. His license to kill has been revoked. James Bond is now a rogue agent, hell-bent on revenge against Sanchez. Bond first ends up ruining a drugs buy and making off with Sanchez's money, but also inadvertently kicked off an undersea fish party that's raged for several months. Then his plan is confused. Half of it seems to be to set up Sanchez by making him suspicious of his loyal allies, and the other is to just kill the bastard whenever he gets a chance.
Watch the birdie, you bastard.
A failed attempt at assassinating Sanchez does manage to allow Bond to get closer to Sanchez, who's got a big deal cooking, where he can smuggle cocaine mixed in with gasoline in a gas tanker and then reconstitute the product at the other end.
And if there's a problem with customs, no evidence.
And then the script remembers that the film has to end soon, so there's a fire and then a chase sequence with 4 gas tankers. Bond finally catches up to Sanchez.
Don't you want to know why?
Sick burn, 007. License to Kill is a film that does have some pretty good action sequences. The tanker chase is exciting, there are cool aerial stunts, water stunts, and the obligatory fight scene on a conveyor where a villain gets caught in the mechanism and ground into a pulpy mess. But even in a James Bond film, is that quite enough to make up for other shortcomings in the film?
Killing me won't stop anything, Sanchez!
There are worse things than dying, hombre.
Bond budgets had stayed relatively stable throughout the 1980s, but costs had started to climb. A few Hollywood productions throughout the decade would use Churubusco studios in Mexico. When the Bond team saw the state of the facilities in Mexico City compared to their traditional home base at Pinewood Studios in the UK, they were alarmed. But according to Cubby Broccoli, it was either Mexico or there would be no film. Bond had a license to kill, but apparently not to print money. You might think the Latin American feel of the story might make a Mexican studio a very good fit, but at the same time most audiences wouldn't have been aware that Conan the Destroyer, David Lynch's Dune, Rambo, Honey I Shrunk the Kids and Total Recall were all filmed in the same studios. While filming expensive films in cheaper countries had been fairly common, the 1980s was where this sort of cost-cutting really took off. The number of Hollywood productions filming in Mexico would tail off in the 1990s, as a preferred, cheaper location would be sunny Vancouver, where you can replicate any US location you like, so long as it's Seattle, and be able to film rain, hail or shine. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
I got a British sucker who dropped $250,000 and he wants to play No Limit.
Which one?
Table 2. Plays like a real jerk-off.
The film still looks nice, if really bright, thanks to the locations in Florida and Mexico.
Shaken, not stirred.
The standout location was a community centre apparently little used, but it's a place that looks totally at home in a Bond film. Michael Kamen's soundtrack is quite decent, feeling a little like a John Barry score, but one that actually created a dynamic version of the James Bond theme. Kamen overuses the theme slightly, but it's always nice to hear the Bond theme played on a guitar. The title song sung by Gladys Knight and the Pips is nice enough, but hasn't really stuck in the mind of anyone who doesn't watch the Bond films all the time. It has echoes of John Barry's Goldfinger theme, many echoes, which is why songwriting royalties would eventually be split among the writers of both songs.
You earned it. You keep it, old buddy.
Dalton is back, though Bond is a changed man. His hairstyle, his demeanour, even his accent.
Why don't you wait until you're asked?
As Bond is a man with revenge occupying his every thought, it's Sanchez, the villain of the piece, charmingly played by Robert Davi, who gets all of the outrageous one-liners.
Another $80 million write-off!
I guess it's time to start cutting overhead.
He's suave, almost a mirror image of how Bond is usually played, but he's also prone to losing his shit when things stop going his way.
Cyanide.
Davi is definitely one of the film's saving graces, and he's given the majority of the one-liners that, had they been given to Dalton, he would just step on like one would step on a bug. But not that one.
You carrying? If they start shooting, you just hit the deck and stay there.
Carey Lowell as pilot Pam Bouvier is glamorous and able to hold her own in the rough stuff.
This Kevlar's great!
Talisa Soto as Sanchez's kept woman Lupe is less engaging in her role. Without going through the entire supporting cast, Anthony Zerbe plays one of Sanchez's cockeyed associates.
He threw the pilots out and flew away.
Like a little bird.
There's a very young Benicio Del Toro as Dario, one of Sanchez's killers, who really seems to love his work.
You're dead.
David Hedison had of course played Felix Leiter before in Live and Let Die. The book of the same name originally featured the scene of Leiter being mauled by a shark.
See you in hell!
No. Today is the first day of the rest of your life.
Singer Wayne Newton plays a small role as the charismatic Joe Butcher, and there's the always welcome Desmond Llewellyn as Q, playing a much larger role in this film than usual.
Pam, this is Q, my uncle. Uncle, this is Miss Kennedy, my cousin.
Ah, we must be related.
Bond, no longer working for the British Secret Service, mainly relies on his wits in this film. Q, on a working holiday, does sneak Bond a few gadgets such as a gun with Touch ID built in and some plastic explosive hidden in a tube of toothpaste.
Everything for a man on holiday. Explosive alarm clock, guaranteed never to wake up anybody who uses it.
But Bond mainly relies on gaslighting Sanchez. Until, of course, he literally lights the gas on Sanchez.
Smile, boys.
Don't use the flash!
So, having talked about the good aspects of the film, why am I generally down on License to Kill? Harder-edged Bond isn't the problem, as I quite like the Daniel Craig films. It's just something about the overall feel and execution that just leaves a nasty taste in your mouth. Like that time you inadvertently swallowed fetid swamp water. I mean, that's a mistake I'm only going to make, 3 or 4 times tops. License to Kill is nasty, or for Timothy Dalton,
Things were about to turn nasty.
we have giant maggots with unit nowhere to be seen, one guy impaled by a forklift,
Looks like he came to a dead end.
one guy has his heart cut out, Felix loses his bride and his leg, and here one person is angrily posting spoilers for No Time to Die in the comment section of every James Bond video they can find, and of course somebody exploding in a decompression chamber.
What about the money, Patron?
Launder it.
I mean, Sanchez and his crew are meant to be villains, but it still feels a little off for Bond. It's got the edge of films like RoboCop or Lethal Weapon, but without any of the charm.
What a terrible waste of money.
Perhaps the mistake was that in chasing these R-rated action films, they ignored the sense of humour displayed by those films. It's a plot-heavy film, with Bond never stopping to talk about why he's so obsessed with Sanchez. A lesser actor than Chuckles Dalton would have made this a far less watchable film, but it's just not particularly fun. Why did Timothy Dalton's Bond cross the road to humorlessly kill the guy on the other side?
Then you have my resignation, sir.
We're not a country club, 007.
Unlike Sanchez, the film feels underdone. License to Kill was one of the box office casualties of that summer of 1989, where it was among a number of high-profile releases whose ticket sales were hammered by Tim Burton's Batman. It still did good numbers worldwide, but North American box office was way down. I mean, a downward trend is great if you're a skier or a skydiver, but not in terms of your franchise's long-term profitability. To some, it seemed as if the Bond franchise was burned out. Just like Sanchez. Legal and financial issues would prevent United Artists and Cubby Broccoli from immediately moving forward with a third Timothy Dalton film. In the 90s there'd been an animated series, James Bond Jr., but it would be 6 years before Bond was back on the big screen, and then it would have to be without Dalton. License to Kill is not a total waste of time, but it does seem like it just wasn't executed as well as it could have been. Like the time Auntie Beryl played the lead in our local Christmas pantomime production of Death of a Salesman and she accidentally shot Biff in the foot with a BB gun on opening night.
God help you, Commander.
Like every lesser entry in the franchise, the film has its fans. I just would not count myself as part of their number. Of the official 80s Bond films, this is by far my least favourite and the one that I don't particularly look forward to watching. License to Kill was the last of 5 Bond films directed by John Glenn and would also be the last film actively produced by Albert R. Cubby Broccoli. Timothy Dalton was a good Bond and could have been a great Bond with better material than he was given in License to Kill. You can have the most expensive Rolex in the world, but you'll still miss the train if you can't actually tell the time. I'll admit I don't actually know what any of that means, it was just something a Casio salesman once told me. Still, some people do enjoy License to Kill, in which case leave a comment, fire away.
Sweet dreams, Mr. Bond.
I hope you don't snore, Q.
Next up, the usually short gap between Bond films becomes a very, very long gap. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.
Bless your heart.